Hello, everyone. My name is Reginald Maddox. This is Action to Service. Today's presentation is going to talk about community de-escalation. As you are aware, for those of you who've joined our presentations before, these are really short courses, about 30 to 33 minutes, just enough to give you a little information. And we also have our contact information, so feel free to reach out to us if you would like additional details or information about our services. Since this is only 30 to 33 minutes, why don't we just go ahead and jump in? If you would like a copy of this presentation, if you got any questions concerning the material that we present today, at the very end of the presentation, we'll have our contact information. Just reach out to us. Also, you'll be able to sign up if you are looking to just get on a regular schedule to know when we present these, so you can be a part of our actual live presentations. So the content for today, we'll do a brief introduction, public versus police, security. We're going to talk about public misconceptions, listen to understand, compliance is not a weakness, engage with intelligence, and of course, at the end, a big thank you for joining us. Now, when we first talk about the introduction, basically, we felt this is necessary because when we talk about de-escalation, we're often addressing this towards police and security officers. But de-escalation also is a responsibility that falls upon the general public as well. And I think it's very important that we sort of get both sides on the same page because de-escalation is a goal. It's something that you want to achieve. The thing about de-escalation is de-escalation only works if all parties involved are willing to participate in the process of de-escalation. Unfortunately, and if we look at this from a realistic standpoint, there are times when people simply do not want to participate in the process. They're not willing to go along with the process. And we're going to discuss some of those reasons why they may feel they don't want to cooperate, they don't want to be involved in the process, but also how that actually contributes to officers or even the public trying to calm down an officer and de escalate a situation. So when we talk about the public versus police and security officers, I think the first thing that we have to talk about is expectation. Whenever someone calls for the assistance of a police officer or security officer, they already have an expectation. They have an expectation of what they want to happen. But oftentimes they don't, the public, the individual, let's say the individual, may not consider, is my expectation realistic in regards to what I am requesting assistance with? Is this something that's within their jurisdiction? Is this something that's within their authority? Because sometimes officers may arrive on the scene, they can assist in calming the situation down, but they don't have the authority to make a final decision. As you're going to hear a couple times throughout this course, if this is a civil matter, then this is something that just may need to go through the court system. It may need to go through the county. This could be an issue that that may require, say, code enforcement to get involved with. So there are different aspects to this. And when people call the police or they call security, keep it in mind that these days, police and security have become a respond to all type thing. And it's like no matter what the problem is, call the police, call the security. And every situation that they're called for is not really what they are designed to respond for. But because they serve the public, they're just police and security officers just simply call for every single thing. Primarily police officers working the streets, in the communities. They are called for every single thing. So, what is the expectation when you call a police officer or security officer? And sometimes when people don't get the results they want, because in their mind, they're expecting the officer to say, yes, you're absolutely right. This person needs to do this, or we're taking this person to jail. without realizing that, as we said before, the officer has a certain limit of authority that they have to abide by. And also ask yourself, is what I'm expecting from the officer who arrives to assist me realistic? Next is accountability. Be open minded and accountable. Sometimes when we are engaged in situations with somebody else, our emotions can kind of take over. And when this happens, we sort of lose track of things we say, we sort of lose track of things we do, because now we're operating not from a logical standpoint, we're not using cognitive thinking, we're operating out of emotions, out of anger. So that frustration and everything is sort of making us act out of character in some cases, causing the person to behave how they normally wouldn't behave, but yet the person is not really accepting accountability for how their actions, their behaviors, their words contributed to the situation escalating to the point that it is now. So by the time the police or the security officer gets on scene and they're trying to really figure out what's going on, it's now more about my emotions take my side versus having accountability for how I contributed to the situation and just being open to hear from an outside perspective, hey, maybe I could have did this better, or maybe next time this is the route I need to take before I took whatever actions or said what I said. As we kind of mentioned earlier, you know, officers are called for a variety of reasons, but some things have to be addressed through the court system. There are different processes for dealing with different things. Everything cannot be addressed through the police or through the security officer. We know for colleges, a lot of times, a lot of the disciplinary process is handled by the dean's office. It's not really the campus police unless it is a true criminal crime. But yet people will expect, that campus police or that campus security officer to make decisions that they don't have authority to make. So there are things that we need to consider, and sometimes the public is just simply not aware of authority limitations. There are only a certain amount of there's only certain things that their authority will allow them to do. So, despite the fact that you may not like this person or you feel uncomfortable about this person taking pictures on the sidewalk, it was a public sidewalk. They have every right to do it. So, when you call the police and they say, hey, they're on the public sidewalk, they can take pictures of the front of the building, you know, now you're upset with the officers and you start cursing and yelling at the officer. But keep in mind, just as you expect laws to protect you and your rights, you also have to protect the rights. There are laws that also protect the rights of others. So those same laws apply. So you cannot expect officers to break the law just to make you feel comfortable. So that's just something to think about. Now, I know this course is going to be kind of hard for some people to hear because right now, a lot of people, when they look at police officers and security officers, they put them in one boat. As soon as one negative thing happens, every police or security officer is categorized as being a negative factor, non caring about the community, when in reality, we have to face the fact that that's just simply not true. So bear with us as we go through this, but I just want to get you to see that de escalation has to be something that's contributed by both sides. Both sides have to contribute something for de escalation to work. Real briefly, let's talk about some misconceptions when it comes to security officers and police officers. And we see a lot of this with First Amendment auditors. We see a lot of this with traffic stops. But there are some laws that are just simply not the same in every state. So, whatever state you reside in, you have to remember the United States is a big continent. So, you have to keep in mind that everything does not apply from one state to the next. So, the laws are going to vary. There's going to be slight changes here and there. Speeding may be legal in one state, but the speed limit may vary. Whereas in some states, the main highway may be 55, other states, it may be 65. So things are going to change. So you need to be really conscious about that and just keep in mind that some people think that the laws in California are going to be the same as it is in Georgia, or the same that it is in New York. Some of the laws are going to vary. They may be the overall arch may be the same, but the little nuances in the middle that make up that law are going to vary. So you have to be familiar with the laws for where you reside. Um, my call is a priority call. Here's the thing. I think people underestimate the response that is required by police officers and security officers. This right here is primarily for police officers because when police respond to a call, if a call is of a violent nature, you may have 5 to 6 units that are responding to that call. And that's not just them responding to the call. It may require them to block off streets. It may require them to actually search an area. So now you have from 5 to 6 cars, you may have now 10 units that are now responding to an area, trying to contain a potential threat to protect the general public. So it's not like there's one car for every citizen. You have to keep in mind that police officers have to be very strategic about how they respond to calls. This can also apply to security officers. When they're working in a building or they're working on a property, if you're locked out of your office or you're locked out of somewhere and you want to get in, but if they're responding to a medical emergency, if they're responding to a potential threat, then all officers may be on the scene trying to protect the rest of the property and the employees. So we have to think about that when you think about the police officers, don't get in the mindset of, well, I just called, somebody's going to be here in 3 minutes. So they're taking calls from a lot of people, and the calls are prioritized. So if you're calling because someone slapped you yesterday, they assaulted you the day before, but you decided you want to report it 2 days later, they're not going to drop other calls that are happening or in progress to respond to something that's not really a threat. That's probably a phone call a report they can do over the phone. Mistakes. I think it's very important to understand that mistakes will happen. And I think people have to understand that when police officers get calls, these calls are normally coming from third parties, unless it's something that the officer actually observed. But most of the police calls that do come in that they're dispatched to, they're coming from the general public. So sometimes information can get, miscrewed. They can say that the person had on a red shirt with white pants and blue shoes. But if that person was sort of traumatized or just nervous or in fear, when they relay that information back to the 911 dispatcher, they may get the colors mixed up. It may be a white shirt, red pants, or they may be really unclear about the colors. So sometimes the descriptions will be off. So if you're someone in the area and you have on a white shirt with red pants, and that's the description that was given into them, the officer should approach you with respect, and good officers will try to explain what the situation is, why they investigate to determine if you are the person that was involved in the situation. So those are the things that you have to keep in mind, that the system is not perfect, because you're relying on different people to give you information, and it's up to the officers to really investigate to determine, is that information we receive accurate? Are we getting accurate information about the suspect or the subject or the victim? Is the information accurate? Once we verify the information, let's proceed from there. Really, the only way for them to verify is pretty much on the scene when they're talking to the people that was actually involved. Now they're getting the real information. Additionally, police officers are not lawyers. So you can't expect police officers to know every single aspect of the law. That's just the reality of it. Lawyers go to school for 5 to 7 years to learn different parts of the law. So they're not lawyers. There will be mistakes. They are human. So, and laws are constantly being updated. So there's constantly things that they have to learn. And that's why a lot of things are resolved in the court. Officers should deal with the facts that they gather from the investigation. So they're not lawyers. And oftentimes we see people that, who sit at home or First Amendment auditors, and the first thing they do is start spewing out case law. You know, Jorgensen versus Minnesota, they just start spewing out case law. They want the officer to sit there and dispute that. You know, case law, it was handled in the courts. It was not handled by the officers who was working. It was handled by the court. So case law, they're not going to dispute that with you. Okay. I'm pretty sure there are officers who do read some case law. They are probably familiar with case law in their area. But when they're in the process of an investigation, they are not going to sit there and dispute case law with you. That's not their job. That's not what they're there for. So please keep that in mind. And I see a lot of people doing that. And honestly, they say, like, well, you're holding me up. You're delaying me from going about my business. When in reality, the person is sitting there really just trying to throw out all these case laws and want the officer to answer for this case law, that case law. The officers are not lawyers. Okay. So that's important to keep in mind. Listen to understand. Now, this is something that I see in a lot of conflicts. This is not just officers and the general public. This is people in general. A lot of people don't listen to understand, because when people get into an argument, when people's emotions take over, they start to speak from their emotions and not a logical and rational standpoint. They're no longer listening. You ever heard two people argue and they're going back and forth, and at certain points, you're like, well, you're saying the same thing that that person is saying. Y'all are agreeing. Y'all really have already come to a resolution, but you're so emotionally charged that you're not listening to each other. There's even times when a person would apologize, but when a person is so angry, they don't hear anything but the thoughts in their head. And when a person has so many thoughts and so many emotions going through their mind, they're unable to transcribe what is being communicated to them. So listen to understand. Now, on top of that, when it comes to dealing with officers, one thing I like to tell the general public, well, first, let me go back. One thing I always teach when I do a de-escalation course is I tell the officers that the first barrier that you're going to encounter is your uniform. That is the first barrier, because people see that uniform and there's already a perception based on the fact there's a badge, there's a gun, there's a uniform. People have to look past the uniform in the initial aspect of the approach of the engagement. Because what we have is, when you look at that officer, you don't know what he's thinking, you don't know what his intentions are. But if you just focus on that uniform and you start catching an attitude, yelling and screaming, you're already escalating the situation. So this is a situation that don't need to be escalated. You have to be mindful of your thoughts. You have to be mindful of what you're thinking, because sometimes you could actually be angry and talking to a uniform instead of actually talking to the person, because visually that's what you're focused on. You're focused on that uniform instead of the person. So as the general public, when we do engage with officers, try not to let the uniform define the conversation. Give that officer a chance to actually speak and talk. So now you know, because a good officer doesn't make his uniform his voice. A good officer speaks to you because he understands, I'm talking to you person to person. Yes, I'm a representative of this security company. I'm a representative of this college, this university. I'm a representative of this police agency, but I am a person wearing a uniform. My voice is my voice. The uniform is not my voice. One of the most annoying things is to see officers who speak with their uniform and think this is my voice. Allow that officer to give that officer a chance to speak to you person to person. Don't focus so heavy on the uniform because it can cause you to alter your perception, which can cause you to alter your tone. Which brings us to the next one. Control your tone. Control your tone. Just because that officer is approaching you doesn't mean that you have to be angry or yelling or screaming. Control your emotions. It's not necessarily to be animated in your body language. It's not necessarily for you to be over emotional about a situation. Hear what is going on. Hear what has taken place. Follow the instructions that you're given. Follow the instructions that you are given by the officer. Now, a lot of people think, well, they don't have the right to ask me to step out my car. Yes, they do. Stepping out your car does not mean you're going to jail. But this is a part of the communication process, how the officer communicates with the person in the vehicle and how the person in the vehicle communicates with the officer. So follow the instructions because this is all going to play a part that's going to work to your advantage if you decide to go to court. Now, one thing I tell people to do is most police departments and security companies, they have what's called general orders. Now, not all police departments, security companies do this, but they all have general orders. But there are some agencies who actually post their general orders online. And it covers their conduct, it covers their behavior, it covers the expected work ethics. So you need to be mindful of this. So whatever city or county or state you're living in, look up the general orders for the agency that works for your area and just kind of read over it because it'll give you a better understanding of what that agency expects them to do. Some people believe that every agency requires the officer to identify themselves. Well, every agency doesn't. But if it's in their general orders of how they conduct traffic stops, that information will be good for you to know. So now it gives you a little more insight to how the officer is supposed to handle the situation. And instead of the individual making accusations or assumptions of what the officer is supposed to do, now you know because you have been informed, it's in writing from the agency about their general orders that shares that information with you. And be open to understand why the interaction was initiated. Because sometimes when you're driving and you just maybe in thought, maybe something just happened in your mind, just kind of wandered for a minute and you didn't stop at that stop sign. Maybe you just, you thought you could make that light and you didn't make that light. Be honest. And like you said earlier, accountability. Have accountability. This interaction occurred. Why? Was I speeding and unable to slow down before I got caught? I ran that stop sign, didn't see the officer over there. So these are the key things that you have to keep in mind is why the interaction was initiated and accepting accountability for the fact that I got caught, I messed up. A quick story, I remember, I'm from Columbus, Georgia, and I was driving one day and I pulled out of we was a gas station and I looked across the street and when I got on the street, I drove about 30 feet and I was like, crap, my seatbelt. And I reached up and pulled my seatbelt down. So I got about a block down the street and the officer pulled me over. And when he got out the car, I was like, I already know what it's about. But I didn't say that. So, but when he came up to me, he was like, hey, he said, I pulled you over, you didn't have your seatbelt on. And at that point in time, I mean, honestly, I'm not going to sit there and lie and deny, oh, I had my seatbelt on. I said, and be honest with you, I just told him the truth. I said, listen, I say, I got in my car and I pulled off. I didn't even think about my seatbelt until I saw you sitting right there. And then I tried to put it on. He said, yeah, that's what I figured. He said, I don't want to give you a ticket. He said, but unfortunately, my sergeant is there. They're really on us about enforcing seatbelts. Not a problem. Was it my fault to be mad at him? Should I have been mad at him for doing his job? He was just doing his job. I can only be mad at myself because if I would have got in my car and just put my seatbelt on, no issue. He wouldn't have pulled me over. There would have never been an interaction. Yeah, he would have had no reason to initiate an interaction with me because I did not have my seatbelt on. That was my fault. I got to self accountability that that was my fault. So you have to be understand you got to have accountability for why the interaction occurred. Compliance is not a weakness, and I think this is something that we see a lot. Uh, the mindset of people when they're engaged with officers, when they're asked to do something. Oh, I look weak now. I don't want to look weak. I gotta debate it. I gotta be confrontational about it. Compliance does not mean you're weak. Presenting your driver's license, I mean, what's the problem? Some people will simply hand their driver's license over. You get it, okay, well, go about your way. But then there are people who feel like, well, did I break the law? Have I committed a crime? In the process, committed a crime? Am I being suspected of a crime? They want to do this whole back and forth. Now, there are certain states which are stop and ID states, and certain states that are not. I'm not saying that you should ever forfeit your rights. I am not saying that at all. I'm saying pick and choose your battles wisely. Some issues are better resolved in court than at the scene. And oftentimes, when people are asked to comply with certain things, they want to get argumentative, they want to get confrontational. There have been times when I've been pulled over, I'm like, this is BS, but hey, let me get about my way because they got nothing on me. My record is clean. I'm going about my way. Foul language and insults can work against you because a lot of times people feel like I can just curse and be vulgar, but yet when this is captured on video, because the most all office pretty much most agencies are using body cams now. When this is captured on video or you captured on your video and this goes before court and the judge sees you basically being a jerk, acting, erratic and argumentative and confrontational, this can work against you in your case. And a lot of people think this is the way to do things. The same thing how we tell police officers that when you're engaging with someone and security officers, be professional, monitor your tone, don't get caught up in an emotional battle, remain professional. It is the same thing for the public. When you are dealing with an officer, if you feel like that officer uh, behavior was inappropriate, you feel like the stop was unwarranted, it was a violation of the Fourth Amendment, then you know what you do? You be the professional one. So when you take this to court, nothing can be brought against you. Let the judge see that you did what was necessary to be professional and responsible in the situation. And if the officer acted out of that, then let that be addressed then. But don't let it be seen that you were the one that was unprofessional and confrontational during the encounter. Engage with intelligence. Be mindful of your body language. And I forgot that. And it's supposed to be nonverbals and verbal language. Uh, we're not always aware of our facial expressions or body language, which can sometimes contradict what we're saying. So we need to be mindful of that. All attention is not good attention. And sometimes we'll see people yelling and screaming because they want everybody to gather around. They want everybody to see what's going on. which is they feel like it's gonna add pressure for that officer, but really it can work against you. It does not always work to your advantage because you can look bad. Like I said, just like we tell the officers to be professional, you do the same thing. The worst thing is for someone to get you out of character to where you're now the loud and aggravated and agitated person while the other person is talking calmly to you. You now look like the one who's the problem. And learn your rights. As we mentioned earlier, that laws vary from state to state. So you need to understand and know the laws for your location where you reside. If you're traveling, just kind of get a little bit of insight into the traffic laws for where you're going. You know, laws vary from state to state. They vary from state to state in how they handle. In some states, you can be 5 miles under the speed limit and you'll get pulled over. Where in other states, if you're 5 miles, it doesn't even matter. Some states will give you 5 miles. Some states won't give you 5 miles. So you have to be mindful and knowledgeable about the laws and don't think that just because the laws were here in this state where you moved from was one way and the laws here in the state you are now are going to be the same. No, laws can vary from state to state, so you need to be mindful about that. And that's it, guys. Like we said, 33 minutes. So thank you for tuning in. Please share your thoughts about this. Now, keep in mind as we went through these little topics, it was just a quick run through. The thing about it is, we're not saying that there's right and wrong on either side. I've watched tons of videos to where I've seen officers have really just made some crucial mistakes in how they dealt with certain situations that could have been handled better. You know, so and it's the same thing I've seen with the public. I've seen situations to where the public has also acted in a way that was just really unprofessional, that just really escalated the situation. So there's flaws on both sides, from the officers as well as the public. And I think it's just really important that both sides understand that de-escalation only works when both sides are willing to work together. Hey, thank you for tuning in. You guys have a great day. And don't forget, Action to Service. You can email us for more information about our services, or if you'd like a copy of this presentation to share with others, or if you'd like to be part of some of our more live videos, feel free to reach out to us. That concludes today's presentation. Community de-escalation. You guys be safe.